When Representative Jasmine Crockett walked into that hearing room, 3 CEOs worth a combined $200 billion thought she was just another politician they could charm. 5 minutes later, their legal teams were frantically texting as she methodically dismantled the lies they'd been telling Congress for months. The chamber was packed for the House Oversight Committee hearing on corporate tax avoidance. Camera crews jostled for position as the CEOs of Vertex Pharmaceuticals, North Star Energy, and Apex Technologies sat confidently at the witness table. They'd prepared for weeks with teams of consultants who'd assured them the committee would be easily distracted by technical jargon and vague commitments. What they hadn't prepared for was Jasmine Crockett. The Texas representative sat quietly reviewing her notes as other committee members took their turns. The CEOs relaxed slightly with each passing question. Gentle inquiries about corporate responsibility and balancing shareholder interests that they batted away with practiced sound bites. When the chairman announced, "The gentlewoman from Texas is recognized for 5 minutes," few people looked up from their phones. Even CSPAN producers were taking a coffee break. Marcus Whitfield, CEO of Apex Technologies, arranged his face into what his media coach called concerned but competent expression. He'd been briefed that Crockett was a freshman representative who would likely use her time for general statements rather than detailed questioning. "Thank you, Mr. Chairman," Crockett began, her voice measured but clear. "I'd like to direct my questions to Mr. Whitfield." The Apex CEO nodded, offering his practiced smile. "Happy to help, Congresswoman." "Mr. Whitfield, your company reported $14.6 billion in profit last year. Is that correct?" "Yes, we had a strong year serving our customers and creating shareholder value." Crockett nodded, seemingly accepting the answer. Then she held up a single sheet of paper. "I'm looking at a document from your company's Dublin subsidiary, Apex International Holdings. Are you familiar with this entity?" The CEO's smile flickered imperceptibly. "We have several international structures, Congresswoman. I'd have to—" "It's a yes or no question, Mr. Whitfield. Are you, as CEO, familiar with your company's largest international subsidiary that holds $42 billion in intellectual property rights?" The room shifted. Reporters who had been scrolling through their phones looked up. "Yes, I am familiar with it." Crockett continued, her pace unhurried. "This document shows that while Apex Technologies reported nearly $15 billion in profit to shareholders, you reported just $340 million in taxable income to the IRS. Can you explain the discrepancy?" The CEO cleared his throat. "Congresswoman, international tax law is extremely complex. I'm well aware. I practiced tax law before coming to Congress." Crockett's response was delivered without emphasis, but the CEO visibly stiffened. "What I'm asking is much simpler. How do you explain to American taxpayers that your effective tax rate was 2.3%, while the average American pays 13.6%? A congressional staffer in the back whispered to a colleague, "Did she just say she practiced tax law?" The colleague nodded. "Former public defender who specialized in financial crimes." The CEO's media coach shifted uncomfortably in his seat. This wasn't in the prep materials. "We follow all applicable tax laws, Congresswoman." "That wasn't my question, sir." Crockett's tone remained perfectly even. "Let me be more specific. This document shows Apex transferred $9.2 billion to your Irish subsidiary last year as licensing fees. That subsidiary has 3 employees and an office the size of this hearing room. How is that not profit shifting?" The CEO glanced toward his legal counsel sitting behind him. The lawyer was frantically writing notes. "Those arrangements were established under previous leadership, Congresswoman." Crockett tilted her head slightly. You've been CEO for 7 years, Mr. Whitfield. Would you like to revise your answer? The room was now completely silent. Even representatives who had been having side conversations were watching. What I meant was... Let me help you, Crockett interrupted, holding up another document. This is an internal memo from your tax department dated last year. It refers to what you call Project Bermuda Shield. The memo states, and I quote, "The expanded offshore structure should reduce our effective tax rate by an additional 4.7%, representing approximately $680 million in tax savings for the upcoming fiscal year." She looked up from the paper. This memo has your electronic signature on the approval line. The CEO's face had drained of color. "How did she get that?" whispered the Apex legal counsel to the PR director. The PR director shook his head in disbelief. Representative Wilson, sitting next to Crockett, slid his chair slightly away from her, as if to avoid being caught in the crossfire. The CEOs of Vertex and North Star, initially relieved they weren't being questioned, now stared straight ahead, avoiding eye contact with anyone. "Mr. Whitfield, while your company was implementing Project Bermuda Shield, you laid off 6,300 American workers. You stated those layoffs were necessary cost-saving measures. Would $680 million have saved those jobs?" Before the CEO could formulate a response, Crockett continued. According to public records, the average salary of those workers was approximately $85,000. That's about 8,000 jobs that could have been saved with the money you devoted to tax avoidance schemes. The CEO's media coach was now typing frantically on his phone, likely trying to formulate some kind of damage control strategy. "Congresswoman, business decisions are complex." They certainly are. Let's talk about another complex decision. She held up a third document. This is your company's most recent proxy statement showing you received $47.3 million in total compensation last year, a 24% increase over the previous year. The same year, you laid off thousands of workers. Whitfield swallowed hard. The hearing room had transformed from a routine congressional event into something that felt more like a high-stakes courtroom drama. Junior staffers were now filming with their phones, sensing they were witnessing something extraordinary. "I'd like to direct your attention to the display screen," Crockett said, gesturing to the large monitor behind her. The screen showed a split image. On one side, a gleaming corporate campus with a sign reading, "Apex Technologies Global Innovation Center." On the other, a modest single-story home with peeling paint. On the left is your company's headquarters in San Jose, which received $42 million in local tax abatements last year. On the right is the home of Maria Gutierrez in my district. Ms. Gutierrez worked as a procurement specialist at your Dallas facility for 14 years before being laid off last fall. Crockett's voice remained measured, but now carried an undertone of controlled intensity. Ms. Gutierrez paid an effective tax rate of 18% on her $72,000 salary last year. That's nearly 8 times the rate your $14.6 billion company paid. The CEO started to speak, but Crockett raised her hand slightly. "I'm not finished, Mr. Whitfield." 3 weeks after losing her job, Ms. Gutierrez was diagnosed with stage 2 breast cancer. With her health insurance gone, she's now facing bankruptcy to cover her treatments. The room was absolutely still. Your company's mission statement, proudly displayed in your annual report, says Apex Technologies is committed to improving lives through innovation and responsible corporate citizenship. I'd like you to explain to this committee how your tax avoidance strategies and layoff decisions reflect that mission. For several seconds, the CEO said nothing. The silence in the room was deafening. Finally, he cleared his throat. "Congresswoman, I'm not familiar with the specific employee you mentioned. Her name is Maria Gutierrez, Crockett interjected. She's sitting behind you. The entire room turned. In the second row of the public seating area sat a middle-aged Latina woman in a simple blue dress, her head wrapped in a colorful scarf. The CEO turned slowly in his chair. Their eyes met briefly before he quickly looked away. Crockett continued. Ms. Gutierrez submitted her resume to 47 companies after being laid off from Apex. Despite 14 years of exemplary performance reviews, which I have here, she received only 2 interviews and no offers. Meanwhile, according to your own SEC filings, Apex increased executive bonuses by 32% last year. The chairman glanced at the clock and said, "The gentlewoman's time has expired." "I yield back," Crockett responded, but it hardly mattered. The damage was done. What happened next transformed a powerful congressional moment into a social media phenomenon. As Crockett gathered her papers, Maria Gutierrez stood up. She didn't say a word or make a scene. She simply stood, dignified in her silence, looking directly at the CEO, who couldn't bring himself to meet her gaze. One by one, others in the audience began to stand as well. First another woman, then an older man, then several younger people, all former employees who had traveled to witness the hearing. Within 30 seconds, over 24 people were standing silently throughout the hearing room. The chairman, unsure how to respond to the unexpected demonstration, quickly called a 10-minute recess. As reporters swarmed toward Crockett and cameras focused on the standing former employees, the 3 CEOs were hurried out a side door by their handlers. But the images were already spreading across the internet. By that evening, the hashtag #CROCKETCONNECTS was trending nationwide, with the clip of her questioning being viewed over 12 million times. News outlets scrambled to profile the freshman representative, who had come prepared with documents the corporate legal teams never expected her to have. While conservative outlets attempted to paint her as anti-business, the video told a different story. She hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't grandstanded or made lofty speeches. She had simply come prepared with facts, connected them to real human consequences, and asked direct questions. That was Tuesday. By Wednesday morning, Apex Technologies stock had dropped 4.2%, wiping out billions in market value. Financial analysts weren't concerned about potential regulatory actions as much as they were alarmed by the public relations disaster and what it revealed about the company's governance. The other 2 CEOs from the hearing were now facing increased scrutiny as journalists and financial bloggers began digging into their company's tax structures. North Star Energy hastily announced it was reviewing its international financial arrangements, while Vertex Pharmaceuticals issued a statement about enhancing transparency in tax matters. By Thursday, the story had evolved beyond a confrontation between a congresswoman and corporate executives. Media coverage now focused on 2 aspects: how Crockett had obtained the internal documents and the growing movement of former employees coming forward. Investigative reporters discovered that the documents hadn't come from a hack or leak. They had been legally obtained through a shareholder resolution that Apex had fought to block. When the company finally released the information in an obscure SEC filing, they assumed no one would connect the dots. They hadn't counted on Crockett's legal background and her staff's determination to follow paper trails. What makes Representative Crockett so effective is that she does the work, explained Dr. Elaine Wong, professor of corporate governance at Georgetown. Many representatives use their questioning time for sound bites. She uses hers for substance. The substance was resonating. By Thursday afternoon, Jaffer, Tax the Rich, and Crockett Connects had been joined by I am Maria Gutierrez, as thousands shared stories of corporate layoffs they'd experienced while executives received bonuses. The human stories transformed a technical tax issue into something deeply personal for millions of Americans. Marcus Whitfield, the Apex CEO, appeared on CNBC Thursday evening in an attempt to regain control of the narrative. Dressed casually in a navy crewneck sweater instead of his usual suit, he projected an image of approachable concern. "We take these issues very seriously," he told the interviewer. "Apex Technologies has always been committed to being a responsible corporate citizen. We're reviewing our internal processes and will be reaching out to former employees like Ms. Gutierrez to address their concerns." When the interviewer asked about the documents Crockett had presented, Whitfield's rehearsed composure slipped momentarily. "Those documents were taken out of context in what appears to be a politically motivated attack," he said, his voice tightening. "Representative Crockett clearly came into that hearing with an agenda." The interview might have helped stabilize the situation, except for what happened during the broadcast. Viewers noticed that as Whitfield spoke about reaching out to former employees, a scrolling message appeared on the screen. "Apex announces $50 million stock buyback program." The juxtaposition was screenshot and shared hundreds of thousands of times within hours. Friday morning brought more trouble for Apex. Crockett's office released a statement. "Yesterday, CEO Marcus Whitfield claimed I had taken his company's documents out of context. Today, I'm providing the full context." Attached was a detailed report connecting Apex's tax avoidance strategies to specific corporate decisions over the past 5 years. Each section paired financial maneuvers with their human impact. Factories closed, research projects canceled, health benefits reduced. The report concluded with profiles of 50 former employees from across the country, each with their own story of how the layoffs had affected their lives. The report wasn't just shared online. Printed copies began appearing in the lobbies of investment firms and outside Apex offices nationwide. No one claimed responsibility for the distributions, but each printed copy included a QR code linking to a donation page for cancer patients struggling with medical bills. By Friday afternoon, the story had transcended the news cycle and entered the cultural conversation. Late-night hosts were writing jokes about getting Crocketted. Social media users were creating memes comparing the CEO's face at the beginning of the hearing to his expression after Crockett's questioning. One viral image showed the moment when Maria Gutierrez stood up, captioned simply, "The real power in the room." Sylvia Garcia, a Houston Democrat and fellow Texas representative, told reporters, "Jasmine brings something different to Congress. She doesn't just talk about holding power accountable, she actually does it. And she doesn't do it with theatrics. She does it with facts." Even some Republicans were measured in their criticism. Congressman Jackson from Nebraska admitted to a reporter, "While I disagree with her policy positions, I respect her preparation. She didn't play gotcha games, she came with receipts." The weekend brought no relief for Apex or the other companies. Major institutional investors began publicly questioning whether the tax strategies revealed in the hearing might expose the companies to regulatory risk. 2 large pension funds announced they would be filing shareholder resolutions demanding greater tax transparency. Corporate communications experts were calling it a master class in how not to handle congressional testimony. Business schools were already developing case studies on the hearing, with titles like The Crockett Effect, Preparation Meets Opportunity. By Monday morning, Apex Technologies announced 3 significant changes. The company would conduct a comprehensive review of its tax strategies with input from independent experts. It was establishing a $100 million fund for extended health care coverage for laid-off employees. CEO Marcus Whitfield would forgo his annual bonus, with the funds redirected to job training programs. The other 2 companies from the hearing quickly followed with their own announcements of policy reviews and employee support initiatives. Financial analysts were divided on whether these moves would be enough to repair the reputational damage. What they agreed on was that the companies had severely underestimated Representative Crockett. They prepared for a typical congressional hearing, explained crisis management consultant Diane Reynolds. They got a legal deposition instead, and they weren't ready. The story might have ended there. Another news cycle, another corporate scandal. But what happened next expanded its significance far beyond a single hearing. On Tuesday morning, exactly 1 week after the hearing, Jasmine Crockett introduced the Corporate Tax Transparency Act with bipartisan co-sponsors. The bill would require public companies to disclose their effective tax rates and provide detailed explanations of significant disparities between reported profits and taxable income. This isn't about punishing success, Crockett explained at a press conference announcing the bill. This is about ensuring that our tax system works for everyone, not just those who can afford complex avoidance strategies. Standing behind her were dozens of former employees from various corporations, including Maria Gutierrez, now becoming a reluctant symbol of the movement. When a reporter asked Gutierrez how she felt about becoming the face of this issue, she hesitated before answering. "I never wanted this attention," she said quietly. "But if what happened to me helps prevent it from happening to others, then something good has come from it." The press conference was briefly interrupted when Gutierrez received a call on her cell phone, which she answered on speakerphone at Crockett's encouragement. It was the HR director from Vertex Pharmaceuticals, one of the other companies from the hearing, offering her a position in their Dallas office with full health benefits effective immediately. The spontaneous cheers from the crowd were soon drowned out by clicking cameras, capturing the moment that would lead every news broadcast that evening. By the end of the week, the Corporate Tax Transparency Act had gained surprising momentum, with several key Senate Republicans expressing openness to the concept. "We need to make sure the system is fair," said the Senate Finance Committee chairman, choosing his words carefully. "If corporations are using loopholes that weren't intended, we should address that." Political analysts were stunned by the bill's trajectory. "We're seeing something rare in today's politics," commented veteran Washington correspondent Eleanor Parker. "An issue that breaks through partisan lines because it connects abstract policy to concrete human experience." 2 weeks after the hearing, Maria Gutierrez appeared on a Sunday morning talk show, speaking publicly about her experience for the first time. Poised and articulate, she explained how she had connected with other former employees through a Facebook group. "None of us expected to become activists," she said. "We just wanted to be heard. Representative Crockett gave us that opportunity." When asked about her cancer treatment, Gutierrez smiled. The host then asked whether she had any message for the executives who had testified at the hearing. Gutierrez thought for a moment before answering. "I would tell them that spreadsheets have real people behind them. Every number you cut, every position you eliminate, that's someone's life being turned upside down. We're not asking for charity. We're asking for dignity." The clip of her response was viewed over 30 million times within 24 hours. 3 weeks after the hearing, Apex Technologies announced another significant change. Marcus Whitfield would be stepping down as CEO, effective immediately. The press release cited personal reasons for his departure, but industry insiders reported that the board had lost confidence in his leadership following the hearing and its aftermath. His replacement? A longtime Apex executive known for advocating for more progressive corporate policies, including the creation of the company's now expanded Employee Healthcare Fund. In her first public statement as CEO, Dr. Amara Washington addressed the controversy directly. Apex lost its way by prioritizing financial engineering over our core mission. We're recommitting to being a company that values our people as much as our profits. The following day, Jasmine Crockett was asked about these developments as she headed into a committee meeting. "Corporate America is learning what my clients learned when I was a public defender," she responded, pausing briefly in the Capitol hallway. "When you come up against someone who's prepared and passionate, you'd better bring more than talking points." The video of that casual hallway comment, captured by a junior reporter's smartphone, became yet another viral moment in a story that continued to resonate. 1 month after the hearing, the Corporate Tax Transparency Act passed the House with a surprising bipartisan majority. Senate passage remained uncertain, but the public pressure continued to mount as more companies voluntarily adopted the transparency measures before being legally required to do so. Maria Gutierrez started her new job at Vertex, where she was tasked with helping develop a comprehensive support program for employees facing medical challenges. Her cancer had responded well to the new treatment protocol, with doctors upgrading her prognosis from guarded to optimistic. And Representative Jasmine Crockett. She was already preparing for her next hearing, reviewing documents late into the night with her dedicated staff. The subject this time: prescription drug pricing practices. Pharmaceutical executives had initially agreed to testify, confident in their ability to handle congressional questioning. But after watching what had happened at the tax avoidance hearing, several were now reconsidering. Their concern was summarized by one executive who privately told his board, "We need to be extremely careful. Crockett doesn't ask questions she doesn't already know the answers to." The most lasting impact, however, was on the relationship between corporations and Congress. The Crockett method was being adopted by representatives across the political spectrum. Deep preparation, specific questioning, human stories, and concrete consequences. "We're seeing a fundamental shift in how oversight hearings function," explained political scientist Dr. Marcus Chen. "For too long, these hearings have been performative theater with little substantive impact. Representative Crockett has demonstrated that with proper preparation, they can be powerful tools for actual accountability." 6 months after the hearing, Jasmine Crockett received the John Lewis Courage in Public Service Award. In her acceptance speech, she reflected on the experience that had defined the early part of her congressional career. "People often ask me how I had the courage to confront those executives," she said, "but the real courage wasn't mine. It belonged to Maria Gutierrez and all the others who stood up that day. They had lost their jobs, their health care, and, in some cases, their homes. Yet they still found the strength to stand up and be counted." She paused, looking out at the audience. "My job wasn't to speak for them. It was to create a space where they could speak for themselves. And when they did, America listened." The speech was her shortest viral moment yet, just 97 seconds. But its impact continued to reverberate through the halls of Congress and corporate boardrooms across America. Because when Jasmine Crockett walked into that hearing room, 3 CEOs worth a combined $200 billion thought she was just another politician they could charm. They never expected she would change the rules of the game entirely. They never expected she would make them see the human cost of their spreadsheet decisions. And they certainly never expected that one day they would have to answer for it.